Ciao, y'all. Joe here. I know Espresso.com. I know Espresso.com. If you've seen previous videos, you know that I generally say it's not much of a website. I don't do websites. I do coffee machines. But it's a placeholder and a place to look it up if you want. Generally, my videos are for my customers, my clients. I do a coffee machine repair, refurbishing, customizing, rebuilding, etc. And I focus highly on espresso machines in particular. Have my own blend. My wife and I do our own blend of espresso coffee, which is actually great for brewed coffee as well. It's called the Blessed Bean. And today our topic is descaling, and boy is it a popular topic on YouTube at least. And generally I only post videos also not just for my clients, but when I do one for public consumption, it's also because there's nothing out there that describes or expresses exactly what I think some of you might want to know. And I've gotten some requests for how to descale a dual boiler machine, a true dual boiler machine, like this one that we're looking at. This is a Profitec 700 Pro that's in front of us. It's version 1.5 or 2. It is not the original, but it's also not the latest version. But that doesn't matter. This same process can apply to ECMs, rockets, almost anything out there that is a true dual boiler. This one has stainless steel boilers, but again, it could apply also to a dual boiler copper boiler machine. It's not, all of that really doesn't matter so much. So let's get into it. You can see that the machine is up to temperature. I think you can read there where our steam boiler is at 258 or so, and the coffee boiler, and that's how I'm going to refer to them just because it's straightforward and easy to understand. Our coffee boiler is at 209 or so, so it's ready to make coffee, basically, just to pull a shot or to froth milk. What I do want to mention before we get in too much further is this. It's little known, but easy to understand if you can just follow me for a moment. What most people don't realize is that the two boilers really do two separate functions, right? So the coffee boiler, what we would call the coffee boiler, what I call it, is over here. Let me pull this cover off. Not that you'll be able to see the boilers, but it'll just be easier when I point to stuff. So the coffee boiler is on this side of the machine. It is a smaller boiler than the steam boiler, which is over here. It's about 75%, maybe a little less than the steam boiler. And it's separated in the way that the coffee boiler only provides coffee to the brew group for brewing a shot of espresso. That way, the PID and the electronics can manage the temperature of that boiler much more carefully and individually because it's only supplying water for one thing, coffee. The steam boiler, we call it that, but actually it's the steam and the hot water boiler for the hot water spout for your Americanos and such. So that one is regulated by temperature, but also, of course, you see the pressure gauge so that you can see that the steam boiler is actually up to pressure. So the steam boiler has to provide both hot water, which comes out of the bottom of the boiler, and steam, which comes off the top of the boiler, and therein lies the little bit of a hitch in descaling a dual boiler machine. The coffee boiler doesn't need to be drained to descale it very thoroughly because the water is really completely filling the coffee boiler. The water enters in the top, circulates to the bottom, and as you can imagine, cold water entering drops to the bottom, and the heat of the water pushes the hot water to the top, and then it enters or exits through the brew group when you open your valve or a switch, whatever you have. The point is that that's easy to descale, or more easy to descale without draining the boiler, because the water is flowing completely inside that boiler. So whatever water you put in is the water that eventually will come out. But on the steam side, we don't have that situation. The water you put in the boiler goes in the boiler and stays at the bottom, because that's a closed chamber and it's creating pressure, which turns into steam, right? So if you think of a pressure cooker you might use on a stove, it's a closed chamber, it just has the little jiggler on top. You put a moderate amount of water in the pressure cooker and you heat it up thoroughly, and what happens, right, the steam is actually what's cooking the food, more or less, and that's what's happening inside our steam boiler. The hot water is at the bottom and it will only fill about halfway, just enough to cover the heating element. If you look, you'll find a cutaway version of this. Whole Latte Love has a good video that shows the cutaway of everything. And you can see clearly on the steam boiler, the probe that measures the water level turns the water fill off right after that element, the heating element, is totally submerged or immersed. So the trouble is that we have trouble getting that boiler empty, because the only way to get hot water is to have it under full pressure. And so what I want to show today is how to drain the steam boiler as thoroughly as possible without having to disassemble the whole machine and take out the drain plug. There is a drain plug that's accessible from underneath, but it really requires manhandling the machine, putting it on its side or lifting it over to its backside. It's very complicated. The coffee boiler also has a drain plug, but it's even more difficult to get to. None of the manufacturers of the machines I've worked on, Rocket, ECM, Profitec, all of these kinds of dual boiler machines, the coffee boiler drain plug is very difficult to access and doesn't even have an access panel. The steam boiler on this at least does have an access panel to drain it through the drain plug, but again, that's very complicated. That's how I do it. What I want to show you is how you, as the end user, the consumer of this machine, or many like it, you can do this at home without having to completely disassemble things and removing a whole bunch of stuff. Okay, so the way to do that is this. You want it up to full temperature and pressure, as you see here, and then you want a large water container. This is a 1 liter pitcher. You could use something like that that's heavy plastic that can handle very hot water. Now, while remember, our temperature gauge shows, the PID shows that the water, quote unquote, in the boiler is 259 degrees. Well, that's not really what's happening. That's just the internal temperature of the boiler. The water temperature, because it's under pressure, is certainly not 260 degrees. It's much less than that, but that sensor, the probe that's in there sensing the temperature of the boiler, is sensing the steam and the internal temperature of the boiler, not the water, unlike the coffee boiler probe, which is sensing the actual water temperature inside the boiler. So we need a container that can handle hot water. 210 or so degrees is fine. So something that's microwavable, a glass mixing bowl that can handle hot water temperature is fine. As I say, a plastic one like this, something like this, which is what I'll use today, and or something like this. Now, who drinks Folgers decaf? I don't know about you. I had to fish this out of my neighbor's recycle bin as a joke. I would never drink that. But it does work, actually. This is a 3 liter jug, it will hold 3 liters of water. Our water tank on this particular machine will hold approximately 3 liters of water, but the steam boiler holds about 1.5 liters, maybe a little more depending on how full it is. It could hold up to 1.5 liters, but when it's full, it's only about half full, and then the rest of the room inside the boiler is dedicated to the steam. All right, so let's move forward. To drain the boiler, this is the first step in descaling. We want to drain the steam boiler as much as possible. And again, this is how you could do it as the consumer. You need as I said, a bowl large enough to hold the water. And then you can put it off to the side and just orient your water tap so that it's pointing here. Now I'll remind you, if you've used this machine before, then you know that you cannot get hot water out of the water spout until the machine is up to almost full pressure and temperature. As it's heating, you might be able to get a little bit, but the point is that there's no pump pumping the water through this hot water spout, right? That depends solely on boiler pressure. So as the pressure in the upper part of the boiler builds, and I'll just use this to demonstrate. So let's say this was the steam boiler, and it's filled a little less than halfway with the water. The upper part of this boiler has the steam in it because it's under pressure, it's closed, it's a pressurized container. The heating element is coming up through the bottom, sticking in through the bottom. It's heating the water to more than boiling, which creates the steam, and the steam takes up the upper portion. And it's under pressure until you open the steam wand, which of course bleeds off some of the pressure, and you'll notice that when it's in use, your pressure gauge will begin to fall if you leave that open and you're frothing for too long. Yeah, eventually you probably would run out of steam if you just left it open forever and ever. So what's happening when we want to drain the boiler is we want to use the pressure that's in the boiler in the opposite way that we normally do. Normally we bleed the pressure off the top, and that's where we get our steam to froth milk. But what we want to do is use that pressure to push the water out the bottom and come out through our water tap. So if we were to do that with the pump on, and I'll do it just to demonstrate, if I drain enough water out of the boiler, then eventually the pump will come on and want to refill the boiler. Well, that doesn't do us any good, and you can maybe hear the pump, although it's a quiet because this is a rotary pump, but you saw the light go out, the pump came on to refill the boiler. Well, that doesn't help us because what we're trying to do is empty the boiler. Now we could just begin descaling by putting descaling solution in our tank and doing that, but that's very inefficient because it's only adding some concentrated citric acid water to the tank while we still have a whole bunch of fresh water in there. So the most efficient and effective way to do this is to empty the boiler, and that's what we're after. So once it's up to full pressure and temperature, I'm looking at the gauge there to see when we get the steam temperature. So 255, so a couple of seconds here and it'll be up to full temperature. We're going to actually turn the machine off. Yeah, we want to turn it off because we don't want the pump to try to refill the boiler while we're emptying it from here. All right, so we're there. I'm going to turn off the machine, and now carefully, and this is the only part about this first part of the process that you just want to use some caution because it is hot water. It's not really hot enough to scald, but it is hot. So you just want to be careful, have a big enough container, and turn it on a little at a time, and that's what we're going to do. Just crack it open, and if it splatters or if you're worried about it splattering, just cover it with a towel, and I'll show you why that's even a good idea in a moment. and then as it diminishes, you can open it, and then eventually it's open all the way, and we are now draining as much water as possible out of that boiler. Again, the steam pressure from the top of the boiler is pushing down and pushing the water out the bottom of the boiler, which is the opposite of what normally happens. The water comes in the bottom and the steam comes out the top by our steam valve. So we don't want to open this one, which would bleed off the pressure that's in the boiler. Right now we want the pressure to be pushing the water out, and of course you can see and hear that it is doing that, right? And you'll see eventually that we'll get quite a bit of water out of there. We'll show how much we've actually gotten. And now again, this is open all the way. And there we go. It doesn't take long. There's nothing to disassemble. All right. So now we've gotten as much water as we can out of that boiler. Even if we didn't get all of it, if there's maybe, just a little bit left in the bottom, the point is that now when we introduce the citric acid solution, it's going to be an overwhelming percentage of the solution, which will begin the descaling process. And as I mentioned, when we do the coffee boiler through the same process of just opening it up and sucking the descale solution into the coffee boiler, it's directly replacing pretty much one for one what's exiting. So that's not an issue as far as draining that boiler. Now, if it's seriously descaled, if it's been years since you did any descaling, yeah, maybe you need to bring it in to somebody like me and have them disassemble it, even take out the element and descale it fully, which is what happened with this machine. And that's why I'm focused on doing this. Now, while we have this towel, which is as if you were gonna do a facial at the barber shop, it's nice and steamy. We can use it to clean off any areas of the machine where there's coffee splatter or milk splatter or whatever. It's perfect for that because it's hot, clean water and steam. And if you're using the right kind of towel, any sort of a bar towel is good. Microfiber would be great. That's a great time while you're doing the descaling. Why not clean the pretty parts and even the brew group? That's a whole nother video. I'll let you look for that one. So let's see how much water we got out of the boiler. So remember, this is a 1 liter pitcher. Okay, that's 1 liter of nice hot water. And I'm going to dump that. I recommend doing this near a sink because you'll want to be able to have access to drain, to dump the water. And then we've got another 300 or so, a little over 300 mil of water. So we've gotten almost the capacity of the boiler out of it. Now this boiler was a little overfilled when I started, but still, we can get over 1 liter of water out of a boiler that isn't quite 2 liters. So, and it never really gets that full during normal operation. Again, it only fills to half or a little less than half. Again, if you want to see the cutaway, you can see that the probe is sticking down into the boiler and stops the water fill at about a little less than halfway, just enough to keep the heating element immersed. So we can close this now, and everything else is closed, it's shut off. Now we can move to the next stage of descaling. All right, continuing with the descale process, we've just finished draining the steam boiler as much as possible. And now I have fresh water in this 1 liter pitcher, as we've looked at before. And you'll see now pure citric acid here. This is food grade pure citric acid, and that is the only thing that I recommend for doing this process. Do not use white vinegar. Good Lord, that is so old and outdated. And most manufacturers have said don't do that, including Breville, which used to actually recommend it, but they learned pretty quickly that it is not good for the internal parts of the machine. So, and I don't recommend any other chemical agents, mostly because I want to be able to taste the water to be sure that it is, first of all, highly concentrated so that it's doing its job. And then when I go to rinse, I want to be able to taste the water again to be sure that it's completely rinsed. So no chemicals, pure food grade citric acid. This is in so many food items that you use and eat and drink, you can't believe it. So pure citric acid. I also recommend the finer the crystal the better, because it dissolves so quickly and easily. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I've already descaled this machine, so I'm not going to actually mix the citric acid. That's something that you don't need demonstrated. For this type of machine, this size of machine, which is the total water need for both boilers is about 2 liters of water. Even though the tank is about 3 liters when full to the brim, the normal operation is going to call for about 2 liters. So I would recommend 2 heaping tablespoons of citric acid solution. Now, hardly anybody else out there is even going to tell you how much concentrate to do, but it should make you pucker like crazy if you're going to do this. You want it concentrated. These are stainless steel boilers, and they need a good bit of concentration to get them descaled and not have to let it sit overnight or something silly. So don't worry about it. You're not going to hurt anything within the machine doing this process. So you can either mix the citric acid powder into the water separately, or with this machine, especially if you're using really clean, finely powdered citric acid, then you can even do it right in the tank. You just need to stir it up and make sure that it's completely dissolved. Another bonus of doing this is that it will clean your water tank. I can't tell you, working on these machines, how often I get a machine in that the inside of the water tank is just coated with stuff. And, you know, honestly, that's a perfect job for citric acid. And then this tank can be put in the dishwasher upside down. Even on the lower rack, the heavier ones like this, you can turn off the heated dry, and it's a great way to clean your water tank. All right, so pure citric acid in the water, and I'm going to measure it just again so I can show you how much water the machine will pull in when we turn it on. Remember, the steam boiler is practically empty. And so I'm going to put my tank in and push it down, make sure it's sealed. So I'm going to start with 1 liter. And then I'll put in a whole nother liter. And I think it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's best to use the filtered water that you would be using for making your coffee. Don't go ahead and use plain unfiltered tap water to do this. That's just introducing more minerals into the water that you're trying to get out at this point for the descaling, right? So you should be using your filtered water. So now we have our descale solution in the tank. We have a more or less empty steam boiler, and now we can turn it on, and immediately the pump comes on. There's no heating element on at this point. The light is out on purpose. That's showing you that the heating element is not on for this part of the process. It's refilling with water, and you hear how long it's running. And then what we'll do is take the water tank out and measure how much water is left. We know we put in 2 liters. Now we're not worried about the coffee boiler at this moment. We're only refilling the steam boiler. All right, so it's shut off. The pump has shut off, so it considers the steam boiler full, which of course it's not, as I've mentioned before. It's barely half full. And our light has come on, indicating that the elements have come on and it's beginning to heat up again. So we just turned it around, so it's already fairly hot, right? We just have cold water that's gone into the steam boiler, and that's only at 193, whereas our coffee boiler is still pretty hot. So let's see how much water was sucked in. There you go. So remember, we started with 2 liters from our pitcher. There you go. So that is, well, it's right at 500 milliliters, so half a liter. So do the math, right? That steam boiler holds from this point 1.5 liters of water, 1.5 liters of water. And remember, we pulled out, by the method of draining it through the water spout, we pulled out 1 liter and 300 to 400 milliliters. So we really did get it practically empty. We left only maximum 200 milliliters of water in the bottom of that boiler, which we've now diluted with the 1.5 or so of citric acid solution. So that's why this method is so effective and sensible, because it requires no disassembly or anything to get us where we want to be. Now we do though want to put some citric acid solution through the coffee boiler, so I'm going to put another liter of citric acid solution, meaning a liter of water, and another tablespoon of, that's the same concentration as what's in the steam boiler. So a liter of water, and you can put more, but we don't need more than a liter of concentrated citric acid solution. Boom, we're in. And this will fit under here nicely, so that's good. So now, and it's up to temperature, at least for the coffee water, not critical, but I do want to exchange. So what I would do is turn on the pump and get water flowing, so as much water as is coming out here is going into the boiler. So I can watch and know that I have 1 liter of water in the tank. Now, it'll shut off on its own once it senses that the water level in the tank drops below a certain point, and that's perfect. We can let it do that. In other words, we're not going to get a full liter here because we only have 1 liter there, and the sensor on the tank is going to turn it off before we completely empty the tank. That's okay. This is how much water we have put in, citric acid solution we have introduced into our coffee boiler. And all right, perfect. Now it's shut off, so we can shut that off. And it shut off again. It stopped filling because it ran out of, it thinks, quote unquote, ran out of water. It triggered the sensor in the back. If we put some more water in, and I'm going to do just a few hundred milliliters. Now what I want to do, just using, you can even use your finger if you're not squeamish about the temperature of the water coming out in the brew group. It's only about 200 degrees or a little less maybe, depending on what type of coffee you use it for. You can even just use your finger. You could use a little espresso spoon. That's what I use. Just take a little spoon, put it under the group, and just get a little bit of water and then taste it. Now, if that was citric acid solution, it would be quite tart. It would make you pucker, and that's what you want. You want to be sure that the citric acid solution has entered all of the parts of the brew group, and of course it's in the boiler, filled into the boiler. And it's even dripping out from the pressure relief valve and even the vacuum breaker. We're getting citric acid solution throughout the water path of the machine. The only place we don't have it yet is through the valves, right? The steam valve and the water valve, and we want it to be coming out of those valves. So we'll do that in a moment when we're sure we're back up to temperature. So we have 171 or so in the steam boiler and 212 in the coffee boiler. So what you would do from here is just let it go, come back to temperature, and then doing the same thing we did earlier but leaving it on, you can, with citric acid solution in your tank, exit some water from the water spigot and shoot some steam out through there. Just 30 seconds worth is all you need. And again, you can taste both of those to be sure they're highly concentrated citric acid solution. And then for this part, we're done, because we want to let it sit with the citric acid solution in it for a couple of hours, I recommend at least. All right, this is bonus content. This is for those of you who are a little more mechanically inclined and want to do a little more thorough job of descaling. So you do not have to do this. This is extra bonus information that I only recommend if you maybe change your own oil or inflate keep your tires inflated properly, or you're just fanatical about doing mechanical things on the things you own, etc. So, if you haven't bothered to descale for a couple of years, then this is not for you. So let me show you what I mean. The first thing I'm going to do is turn the machine back off, and that's for everybody really, because now that the descale solution is inside, we're good and it's sitting and descaling. The next thing we can do is take off the aerator from the water wand, right? Because that can get scale in it, and I think I can pop in a couple of pictures of filter screens in the aerator that are just clogged like crazy with scale buildup. And we're going to do the same thing on the steam wand, and this is a good opportunity to clean the holes in the steam wand. We'll set those aside, and again, for those mechanically inclined, you want to take off the group screen. Now I use a plastic pry tool, but honestly, if it's your own machine, you can use a flat bladed screwdriver. On most of these style of machines, they do not have a screw to remove the group screen, and so that's up to you. I can't cover all the different situations, but on this machine it's very easy to do with a plastic pry tool. And you're going to just drop the group screen out along with the gasket. And this machine has been recently serviced, but it's also made a bunch of coffee since then, so this is a perfect time to throw this part in your coffee clean solution. That's the back flush powder that you'll see in many other videos. Not going to talk about that now because it's out of scope of this video, but it's a good time to do that. The reason for doing that is that when we get to the point of flushing or rinsing this machine, we want to have no blockage for the scale buildup to rinse itself out. And it can come out sometimes in particles that would get caught in the group screen here, because that's a very fine screen, even finer than most of the passages in the brew group. And again, the same through the water spout, the aerator, that has some very fine passages. So there's no point in leaving those on and leaving a spot where scale could get caught as we're trying to flush it out. Stage 2, you might say, of if you want to go even deeper, is to remove the entire wand from both valves, so that again, these passages are a little narrower, and the valve has the larger passage. So if you want to be sure that you're not getting any blockage, you can take those off. it's not necessary, again, unless you've really neglected the descaling, in which case that's what I do. I would take them off, and actually I disassemble the whole valve to be sure that it's descaled, but that's, again, out of scope for now. So with the machine off, now I'm also going to unplug it, and this is where we get to the more advanced processes. With it off and unplugged, of course, now what I want to do is take the water tank out, and this has descale solution in it, right? So that's what we're saying. It doesn't actually, I don't want to lie to you, it does not actually have descale solution, but in your case it should. And then the next thing you would do is with a 2.5 millimeter Allen wrench, or hex key it's sometimes called, you're going to remove 2 screws. That's the 2 screws at the back of the deck here. 2 screws. And loosen, you do not have to remove them completely, just loosen them in the front, loosen those so that they're sticking up. And then this deck will come off. Now again, unplugged, no power to the machine. This deck comes off and it slides out from the front screws, and you can remove it and put it aside. Now, with that removed, I'll move the camera in and we'll see what the important part is. The reason that we took the lid off is for this connection right here. This metal piece is the probe that senses the water level in the steam boiler. So the further pushed down that is, the less water goes in. The further pulled up it is, the more water goes in. There's no point in playing with the level. You should just leave it where whoever put the machine together or serviced it left it for you. But what we do want to do is remove the wire. So again, unplug, just to make sure we're being safe. We're going to wiggle that connector off of the probe and just set it aside. It's not dangerous. You don't necessarily have to worry about where you put it. You don't want to connect it to something else, of course. Just leave it loose off to the side. Now, the reason we're going to do that is because that's going to allow us to superfill the steam boiler. You might call it overfilling. That's bypassing the probe, and it's gonna allow us to fill it to the point where we can actually get water out of the steam wand. And that's our goal, is to get water out of the steam wand. We already have water in the bottom of the boiler, and that means also up through the tubing of most of the tubing of the water spout, and we can easily put water through the valve, right? We just opened it earlier to do that. But now we really do want to get water all the way to the top of this boiler, because actually the steam does create some scale buildup even higher up in the boiler, and without being able to put citric acid solution up that high, we haven't done any descaling up above that liquid level. So we want to raise the liquid level, and this is how to do it. So again, off, unplugged, remove that wire. We're not going to leave it removed for long. Let me just make sure you can see what's happening again. Yep, okay. Now we're going to leave everything like it was, put the water tank back carefully. And again, this is open, so you don't want to spill water in there. It's not really going to hurt much, but anyway, there's no point in it. And then I'm going to put a pitcher under my steam spout, like so. And you want to do all of this, as we said when we very first started, that the drain tray should be empty, the drip tray should be empty. And now we can plug the machine back in, just being careful, of course, not to touch any of the internal components. And now I'm gonna tell you first, because you have to do things quickly now. We don't want to overfill the boiler, the steam boiler, to the point where we challenge the steam or the pressure, overpressure release valve. There's a relief valve that if the boiler were to get stuck on for some reason, it would create too much pressure, and that would pop off like the steam rattler on a pressure cooker. But we don't want that to happen. We don't want to put so much pressure in the boiler and so much water in it that we get water coming out of that valve. So again, this is not for just everybody. This is for those who are really more technically and mechanically minded, who want to get that boiler completely descaled. So I'm going to open the steam wand all the way, and of course it's not on, so there's no pressure or anything in there. And I don't know if I can do everything at once so that you can actually see the water coming out, but what we're going to do is, as soon as we get water exiting that valve, the tip of the wand with the frothing tip taken off, of course, then we're going to turn the machine off. So we're going to act quickly. Let me make it so that I can reach back there. Yes, okay. So I think you're following me. There will be water coming out. We can also have water coming out of the water wand. We do this, and it's off and cool, so there's no pressure in the boiler right now. So I'm going to quickly, so again, we have citric acid solution concentrated in our tank, and we don't need much, but we do need at least a liter, let's say, in that tank. Now I'm going to turn the machine on. The pump is going to come on because the probe that tells it that there's no water, that there's water in the tank is unplugged, so it doesn't know that we're actually putting more water than is necessary in that tank. So it's filling. Now you see water, I've turned it off. And now I'm going to turn the knobs closed again. We got a little bit of water out of the water wand. I wasn't watching, but we did, and that's what we want. Now we can leave it off. We know now that we have Descale solution, citric acid solution, all the way to the top of the boiler. Why? Because that steam wand tube, that line, is coming out of the top of the boiler, and we've filled enough water to push water out through here. Not steam, water. So now we know that the steam boiler is absolutely full of water. In normal operation, that would be no good. We don't want that, of course. But for descaling, that's a great situation. Okay. So now we leave it sitting for a couple of hours to let the descale solution, the citric acid solution, do its job. And then we'll come back and see how to rinse to get it clear and get back to full operation. All right, guys. While you were gone, again, this was the bonus information for those who wanted to do a little further descaling and a little more thorough. I reconnected the water fill level probe wire with it disconnected, of course, no power to the machine. I've reconnected that, and I have refilled the water tank with fresh, clean water. So I pulled the water tank out, rinsed it and washed it thoroughly. I put it back, and now it has a full, almost 3 liters of water. I don't know if you can tell that, but you can see now how full it is. Okay, so we want that nice and full of fresh, clean water that with which we would usually make coffee, meaning filtered, and if you have a scale inhibitor in your filter system, that would be great. That's the idea. So right now the machine is off. Let's say it's been 2 or 3 hours, and now we're ready to rinse and get back to using it descaled and nice and clean inside the water passages. So what we're going to do is flip it on, and I'll do that. And I have already done it, but if you haven't, then we want the valves open. We want these valves open, okay? Both the steam and the water valve open. And I know that's not what you normally do when you're heating up to use the machine, but for this purpose, for descaling, we want them open. And remember, we still have off the aerator, and the frothing tip and the group screen is out. Now, why do we want those valves open? Well, remember, the steam tank, but even if you skipped that part and you're just moving forward now to the rinsing process, the steam tank is super full of water. So we want to give it a chance to push some of that scale solution now that has the cloud, what will be cloudy water if you were descaling. You'd have the scale buildup that has dissolved into the water. We want to push some of that out, and you see some of it is coming out of the vacuum breaker valve already as it builds temperature. So we're at 189 in the steam boiler and 214 in the water boiler, and of course I haven't taken the 2 or 3 hours to let it sit and cool. That's obvious, right? So it's going to come back up to temperature pretty quickly. But we want those open so that we can now lower the water level in the steam boiler. We don't want to fill again yet. And eventually what we're going to do is go back to the very beginning. Remember how we started with draining the steam boiler. The fastest, most efficient, and effective way to get all of that nasty water out of the steam boiler is to get it up to full temperature again and use the steam pressure again to push out the dirty water and whatever sediment and scale that has dissolved into the citric acid solution. But to start with, we want to let some of the water out of the boiler so that we can reestablish our, remember, going back to the example in the pitcher, we want to reestablish some headroom, you might call it, some pressure room for the steam. Instead of all water, we want to push the water, there it go. And that's happening perfect on time. As it's heating and there is some pressure building, it's pushing the water back down out of the boiler. And that's exactly what we want. And you could wait, you can wait. If I haven't maybe used as big a container here as I could have. But see, I'm getting some steam and water out of the other side as well. So I'm going to turn that off for a second. And I'll let that one stay open. And I'll just dump this. Now that would be, right, dirty water. So what I'm going to do is open this again now that I have a larger container. And I'm going to do that until I hear the pump come back on and the water fill process. So I'm pushing out a bunch of water to reestablish, as I mentioned, that steam head up above the heating element. And as that splatters, there it is. I don't think you can hear it, but the pump has come on, and you notice the light turned off, indicating that the heating element is turned off temporarily until it refills the boiler fully. And again, it's refilling now with clean, clear water. Now it's done. So the point is that we've now reestablished the water in the bottom, steam building at the top. And that's exactly what we want. So that now we'll empty that boiler completely of the nasty water as soon as we get to full temperature. So we have a little ways to go yet, and I won't make you wait for that. We'll fast forward or whatever and come back when we're at full pressure and temperature in the steam boiler so that we can, again, going back to the very first part of this process, we want to empty the steam boiler now of the citric acid solution and the scale that has dissolved, etc. This is the fastest way so that now we can replace it again. We're going to empty it so that it has only 100 to 200 milliliters of dirty water in there. and we're going to replace that with a liter or more of fresh, clean water. And that's our fastest and best way to get that nasty stuff out and replace it with clean water, and then get rinsed and start again being able to use the machine. So I'll wait, I'll let it come up to temperature, and then I'll come back. Okay, we are almost back up to full steam temperature, and I thought I'd come back a little early and show you what the next thing is that we could be doing while we're waiting for it. I've put the cover back on because we don't need access there anymore, and I've refilled the water tank all the way to the brim, and that's good for this purpose. We want it really full because we don't want to have to be worrying about if we have enough water. So while it's still coming up to temperature, we want to make sure that the brew group now is clean and descaled and rinsed. So remember, you should be soaking your screen and your other parts that we took off, right? The aerator and the frothing tip. You should be getting those nice and clean while you're waiting. And now we can flush the brew group. And that's very simple. Remember that, as I said before, the water boiler, the coffee boiler, it's really, I don't want to say precisely, but it's practically speaking 1 for 1. When you're not obstructing this opening here with coffee or a back flush disc or something, then that pump isn't doing it's doing 2 things at once. It's not doing 2 things separately. It's doing 2 things simultaneously. It's drawing water in from the tank and pumping water out of the boiler, out of the group head. So it's practically a 1 for 1. However much water enters from the tank, exits from the group head. Again, I think if you waited, it would be really close, but I'm not going to go to that extreme to say that. But there's nowhere else for the water to go, really. So we're okay with, as long as we have clean, clear, non-acidic water coming from the group, then we know that the boiler has been rinsed and is cleared. And of course you can go overboard and empty more than we put in before. I always do, just to be sure, because I don't want it to affect the taste of my coffee. But again, this is the beauty of using the pure food grade citric acid solution, right? Because you can taste it and it won't do anything to you, won't hurt you. It's just going to make you pucker a little bit, and it's like drinking really strong lemonade without the sugar. So let's do it. We're going to just open this and let it run a minute, and that's not going to mess with our steam boiler coming up to temperature. But you can already see the water level going down in the tank for as much as has come out the front. So I'm just going to do that, and again, there's no actual citric acid in this machine at this time, but for you there would be if you were following these directions and actually going through the descale process. And I'm going to just do this, almost this whole liter of water, and I just marked that for your purposes, so as you can see, that's an approximately 1 liter frothing pitcher. And that will be way overkill, more than likely for you. That'll be way overkill, and you can even just taste it once in a while as the water exits. And you will know with certainty whether or not you have rinsed it well when you can taste that water and it tastes like good, clean, clear water. Whatever's going in is going to come out. Alright, so that is practically full. Yep. And that is probably all it will take for the coffee boiler. But if it's not coming out clear and clean and without any lemonade taste, I'll call it, then you just do it some more and just watch your water tank level. Now, I didn't say from the beginning, and maybe I should have, I apologize, that this procedure is really for water tank users. However, since this machine will allow you to go from either a plumbed in water supply or from the tank, the easiest way to do this is to go ahead and revert to the tank. they almost always come with both the tank and the water line for plumbing in. So for descaling, the most effective way is to just go back to using the tank. Switch the switch. Again, that's out of focus for this video, but there are many others, and your instructions will tell you how to switch from plumbed in to water tank. So just switch to water tank and use the tank for descaling. It's really effective, and it's actually a bonus. I do many commercial machines that are only plumbed in, hardwired and plumbed in, so there is no tank to substitute when I'm ready to descale those, and it's a lot more complicated. So I mean, you know, I do it, but for you having a machine like this, it's actually an advantage because you can always switch back to the water tank. All right, so we were completing our brew group. Let's say you wanted some more water out of it, and you taste it again, and you say, oh, that's delicious. Nice, clear, clean, hot water. No taste of anything but water. And you're done for the coffee side. Now for the steam side, we should be up to temperature on the, yep, there we are, 258 on the steam boiler. So we're going to do exactly the same thing we did in the very beginning. In order to flush the steam boiler completely clean, we're going to turn the machine off, and we're going to open our valve again. And I have my towel handy if I need to cover it up. Now this time, remember that we have the aerator off, so it's going to spit a little more than it did previously, so you might really want to use that towel to protect it from splattering. And that's also the reason to use a deep-ish and maybe close-up pitcher or bowl, so that you don't get so much splatter. But it will be more than it was previously, but we don't want to put the aerator back on because the water that's coming out, remember, is going to have some of the scale that's been removed in it, and we don't want it to block any of our passages, so we're not going to put it back. But just be aware that it's going to be under more force and it's going to splatter a little more because it doesn't have that aerator in the way. But all again we're doing is emptying that steam boiler now of our dirty scale water. Machine is off. We don't need to really worry about doing that with the steam wand. Once it's back up to pressure, we'll just shoot steam through there until, again, it tastes clean and clear, and then we'll know that that part of the system has been cleaned. But we don't want to put the tip back on until it's completely flushed out. Yeah, this is working great. I'll open it the rest of the way, and that'll get it all out. And now you can hear that it's really just air. That's all the water has been pushed out by the steam pressure. And again, if you didn't do it before, you have a nice hot towel, and it's pretty hot, just be careful, but it cools very quickly, and it's great for cleaning these surfaces on the machine. That will take off any coffee residue really quickly, especially with a microfiber or a nubby towel. Soft, but still with some nubs on it, and with that hot steamy water on it, it does a great job of cleaning. You don't have to really work at it much. Alright, so let's again measure how much water we got out of there. I'll close it down. And again, it's hot, so just be careful, but you should be used to that if you're using the machine to make coffees and steam milk. So there's a full liter. And I think last time we had a liter and 300 or so milliliters, and maybe 400. Yeah, a little over 300 milliliters. So 1.35, let's call it, liters of water. And that's pretty much exactly what we had when we drained it the first time before we started the descale process. Now we know that we've gotten a whole bunch of that dirty water, almost all of it, out of that steam boiler. Now we want to be sure our tank is full, and it's pretty full, so I can flip it back on. And again, leaving, and it's going to refill the boiler, which it's doing now. It's on and it's refilling, and you can tell again by the fact that the light is out. And that's a safety precaution, right? If the heating element is exposed, meaning it's not completely immersed in water, you don't want it to come on because it could overheat it and burn it out. So it's, you know, the machine is smart enough to understand that, of course, so that it doesn't turn on the element when it has to fill so much water, and it won't until the water fill is triggered and it's turned off, and now the element will come on and it will begin heating. And that's again a safety precaution to keep that element from burning out. So now it's going to come up to temperature again. We have 188 in the steam boiler, and we're still at 213. Again, this doesn't even affect the coffee side, right? And we'll just let it heat and come back. All right, guys, folks, friends. We're back to where we started. Almost. We have only just to flush a little more to be sure that we don't have any citric acid scale solution in the boilers. We've already done the coffee boiler and it tasted clean and clear, so we'd be ready to put back the brew group screen and gasket. And of course you want to do your portafilter back flush trick. You can watch another video on that. But just to be sure that we have both, to have that steam boiler completely cleared out and good tasting water coming through. So we already did the complete or near complete emptying of the steam boiler using the method that I showed you earlier. You've seen it twice now. So now we should be able to just open it and flush some water through it. Again, we're still without the aerator and the frothing wand tip, because we want to be sure that we're not getting any blockages. So I'm just going to taste that water just to demonstrate. And yeah, I've done this several times, and once you have emptied that steam boiler and refilled it almost fully with clean, clear water, it doesn't take much left to then be sure to just flush out the rest of the citric acid solution. So you can just do this a few times, not even a few, just a couple, until you hear the pump come on to refill. There you go, it's doing that again. And that will take care of that side. And then on the other side, the same thing. Just flush some steam through there. And again, if you don't want that steam splatter, you can throw a towel over it. And again, you just do that, and then you can taste either the steam. Actually, even smelling the steam, you can tell whether or not you've got all the citric acid's taste out of it. But if you're concerned about the heat from that, then there's always going to be some condensate, some water built up in the pitcher, so you can just taste that. And again, remembering that's hotter than the water out of the spout, the water spout side. That water is going to be hotter, so if you need to, let it cool a little bit or blow on it, whatever. But tasting it is the hands down best way to be sure. And again, that's why I recommend pure food grade citric acid. The fine powder is the best. So really, for all intents and purposes, you are good to go again. Once you've made sure that you're getting clean, clear, delicious water out of all the orifice here, you can put your aerator back on and your frothing tip back on, and you are good to go. So that's really the, well, if you can get it back on. Yeah. Aerators for dummies, right there. There we go. And the frothing tip, after having cleaned it, we've descaled it and cleaned the coffee residue out of the holes. There we go. And now we're back in business, and it's ready to make coffee. So there you go. That is a thorough descale of almost any dual boiler machine, with a little bonus content for those of you who want to venture down that road. And I'll only say a little more about that, you know, whether that voids a manufacturer's warranty or not, I don't know, and I don't really care. If you want to do it, do it. You know, unless you're sending it to someone to have it descaled, that's the most effective and efficient way to be sure that you've gotten the whole machine descaled. And if you follow my instructions exactly, you will not be hurting anything or causing the machine any trouble down the road. In fact, if anything, you're just making sure that you have the whole thing nicely descaled and clean. So there you go. I hope you get something out of this, and ciao, ciao, ciao. Ciao.